On January 3, 1963, In His Image ushered in a brand new age for the Twilight Zone. There were some massive shifts behind the scenes that led to the series becoming a very different animal compared to what we saw throughout the first 3 seasons. As I mentioned in our last review, Season 4 was a late renewal at CBS. They greenlit 18-hour-long episodes. Breaking the traditional half-hour format and having the amount of installments was only the beginning. During the uncertain period between Season 3 and the show's renewal, producer Buck Houghton left for another job, Rod Serling became much less involved, teaching at his alma mater, Antioch College, and TV veteran Herbert Hirschman was brought in to steer the ship. Serling was against pushing the show past its usual weekly half-hour, but it was the only way CBS would renew. He also wasn't thrilled with the time slot changing to Thursday, fearing the series would lose some of its more youthful audience that had grown on its former Friday night schedule. While Rod wasn't as involved with the series as he once was, he still had a full plate. He was teaching mass media and writing in dramatic form at Antioch while still writing feature screenplays and sending in his TZ scripts into Herbert Hirschman on the West Coast. The pair would have regular conversations about every script that came through for Season 4 and argued a few times over Serling's work. Hirschman had a lot of respect for Rod's talent and felt he had to call Serling out when he turned something in that wasn't up to what Herbert felt was the prolific writer's personal standard. Since Hirschman had a directing background, he took a hands-on approach to how things were run. He stepped in to direct reshoots himself when they couldn't get the original director back, and while he wanted to leave intact as much as he could from what made the show work previously, other changes were inevitable. Shooting for an hour program doubled principal photography from 3 to 6 days, which made scheduling difficult. It wasn't possible for regular cinematographer George T. Clemens to keep up with the new heavily demanding timetable, so, at his request, they brought in Robert Pittak to DP every other episode. Pittak stepped in for Clemens before on Season 3's Person or Persons Unknown and was a trusted replacement. Clemens also joined Houghton and Serling in being wary of shifting the show to an hour every week. He feared they didn't have the type of material that would keep viewers engaged for that long. Among some of the other adjustments that happened under Hirschman was the changing of the show's name. CBS dropped the word "the" from the title and officially just called the show Twilight Zone for the final 2 seasons. This is reflected in the new opening that happens to be by far the most famous of any intro the series produced.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension.
Rod wrote and recorded the narration, but it was Hirschman who conceptualized and directed everything else about it. From the props to the overall tone, those 30 seconds may be Hirschman's biggest contribution to the series. The producer also directed all of Rod's on-screen narrator bits, which were shot on off days whenever Serling flew out to LA. They'd pack in as many as possible, a lot of the time when the episodes weren't yet finished shooting, leaving the team to hope the narrator spots still matched the finished product. Rod obviously couldn't be on set for the episodes, so they were all recorded against a generic gray backdrop. This was an unfortunate sacrifice since it was always fun to see how Serling would pop up in every installment. In the same vein, Rod stayed on to preview the following week's show by appearing on camera, but the segments were beefed up to feature extended clips. The ending credits disappointingly dropped the freeze frame from the episode that just finished in favor of a starry night sky background. This is a small but still bothersome aesthetic alteration among the more substantial ones. In the Season 4 premiere, George Grizzard returned to star as Alan Talbot, a Don Juan who's been caught up in a whirlwind romance with a woman named Jessica Connolly. Although they only met 4 days ago, the pair are to be married within a week. Before Alan meets his fiancée one evening, he travels to an empty subway station where an older woman aggressively tries to warn him about temptations of the devil and other religious machinations. Alan tolerates her at first, but as she becomes more hostile, he starts to hear strange mechanical noises that steer him into a rage. He throws the woman onto the tracks below just as the train passes by, killing her. Shocked at his actions, he runs away. With no visual remorse concerning this heinous act, Alan shows up to Jessica's with the intention of showing her his hometown. On their way, Talbot screams in his sleep about a man named Walter, which he denies when his fiancée wakes him up. Things don't get any less curious when they arrive in Corville. While Alan recognizes the town, it seems to have moved on 20 years past his memory, with someone else living in his house and old friends having passed away. There's no record of his place of work, his Aunt Mildred, or himself anywhere in Corville. This eventually leads to Alan hearing the mechanical noises again and, hoping not to attack her, he forces Jessica to go back home without him. Frightened, she complies. Directly after this event, Talbot is almost hit by an oncoming car and injures his arm. When checking on the wound, he discovers even more questions that need to immediately be resolved. Based on his 1957 short story, this was Charles Beaumont's first of 6 scripts in Season 4. The extra time gave him a chance for more setup and to establish a mood. He's known for his darker concepts, and while this one definitely has plenty of dark themes, it's not as haunting as something like The Howling Man or Perchance to Dream. It's got a great opening sequence with Talbot walking alone out of his hotel and waiting in the train station with that prophetic evangelist bearing witness to his uncontrollable violence. Catherine Squire made her comeback to the zone after her appearance in Season 3's One More Pallbearer, playing a totally different role. She's believable in both and really sold her part in the few minutes she was on screen. Squire's not the only one who made multiple trips into the fifth dimension here. Gail Colby plays Jessica very empathetically and sympathetically after her smaller part in the Season 1 classic, A World of Difference. For better or worse, I bought that she had fallen for Alan in those 4 days.
Mr. Talbot, I didn't plan on falling in love with you. But I did. And I'm stuck with it.
Well, thank you.
She gives this heartbreaking little look when Talbot denies their romance in the cemetery scene. It was some of the best acting in the episode.
Is your wife?
No, we're just friends.
Well, Mr. Talbot, you want to tell me what you're doing in Kerrville?
Wallace Rooney had his third and final credit as the angry old man who lived in Alan's house.
I'm sorry.
You satisfied?
Well, as long as he owns up to it. Fine and dandy.
George Grizzard is awesome as Alan Talbot. It's a much meatier role than his part in The Chaser, and he got to show off his talent in a variety of ways. He had really good chemistry with Gail Colby in their scenes that range from romantic to supportive to manic. Talbot is almost in a reverse walking distance situation where he returns to his hometown to see it's the same, but somehow further along in the future. He also has to reckon with the fact that there aren't any records of his existence. Grizzard very much embodied that internal self-torture which slowly ate away at Alan from the inside out.
Somebody I never saw before living in my house. Woman I had lunch with a week ago, dead 3 years. New buildings in the town.
Perry Lafferty did a heck of a job from the director's chair. This was his first of 3 episodes, and they were all Season 4 hour-long installments. He was able to showcase multiple interior and exterior locations that made this story feel bigger than usual, utilizing them to the fullest. I loved some of these shots that Lafferty and George Clemens captured. That subway station was used in The Mind and the Matter and maybe a few other episodes, but it's given a much darker connotation here. The suspense that builds across that scene is perfect, crescendoing into a moment that leaves the audience simultaneously horrified and intrigued. The background details even highlight what the dialogue is about, with one poster advertising a men's clothing company that says it can make you look as smart as the devil.
Oh, the devil's all around us, mister. All around us, everywhere we go.
Some of my other favorite shots were this jib down and later back up past that foreground tree in the cemetery. One of those frames led to a wonderfully lit wide angle on Jessica's car driving through the foggy forested road. In a rare handheld shot, we see the moment Alan loses it and chases after his fiancée. That one was straight out of a horror movie. A moment later, that car nearly speeding right into Alan looked a little too close for comfort. Major credit has to go to the stunt team for putting it all on the line there. I was sure the stuntman's leg got clipped by that car, but when you slow it down, you see he dove out of the way with inches to spare. I wouldn't be surprised if that take was mistimed and they kept it in the final piece. After the near accident, Alan finds circuitry beneath the skin on his forearm. Baffled, he's driven back to his hotel and looks up the name Walter Ryder in the phone book. It's the same name he was shouting in his sleep and the same name that graced the headstone of where his parents' graves were supposed to be in Corville. He soon arrives at a house that has Ryder's name on the front door. It's open, so he enters the dark home only to be confronted by a familiar face.
I've been waiting for you.
Walter Ryder is a scientist who always dreamed of creating artificial life in the form of a perfect replica of himself, without the flaws. In Alan, he succeeded. 8 days ago, something went wrong with his programming and Talbot stabbed Ryder with scissors, escaping the house. Walter explains that there's a malfunction somewhere inside his duplicate that causes him to act out with murderous fury. After finding out that his old memories of Corville are what was confusing Alan, the creator tells his creation there's likely no way to fix his killer fits. Talbot tells Ryder of Jessica and the life they were trying to build together. Upon seeing the pamphlet the woman at the subway station gave him, Alan loses it again. He battles his maker in a desperate fight for life as we dissolve to Jessica's apartment before we see the outcome. Alan soon returns alone to his fiancée. They reunite, trying to forget their strange ordeal and move forward. We dissolve back to the destroyed lab where Alan's mechanical body is laid out, deactivated. Walter is the one who gets to live his life with Jessica as the original, flawed, but human version of himself. That's right, Grizzard gives not one, but two strong performances. He plays off himself well in some very convincing split screen, and the back of the body double they got made the interactions between Alan and Walter pretty seamless. It helps that Walter is a totally different character too. Where Alan is confident, Walter is reserved. Where Talbot fights to find out what's going on, Ryder is resigned to his own shortcomings.
That's the story of my life, right down the line. Success in the little things. Failure in the big ones.
The lab sequence has a few nice exchanges, and the unveiling of these face casts of Grizzard got a little laugh out of me, but this is where things started to drag. It just feels like their conversation goes on for much too long. From Walter's reveal to the ending fight is about 15 minutes. Again, there's great work happening in that time frame, especially the impressive destruction of the laboratory, but it feels like this sequence could have been accomplished in half the time. I guess you could say that about every episode this season, though. I don't like how they dissolved away from the scuffle either. Lafferty had already shown he had a great eye for detail. A simple close-up of one of the failed duplicates with debris and sparks falling around it could have lent itself to a nice transition. We just needed something more meaningful than what we got. It felt a little out of sync with the rest of the show. Overall, this wasn't too bad. Considering it was the first hour-long show, it's far from the worst and set a decent standard. Beaumont's themes of self-improvement, maybe some irresponsible procreation, and a sort of ambiguous happy ending shine through. You can look at the finish several different ways. It's the chance for Ryder to finally live a life he's wanted, and Jessica is out of danger. But Alan ultimately gave in to his mechanical demons and was left in a literal heap. Perry Lafferty's direction, the cinematography, performances, and some well-done effects make this a recommendation despite minimal pacing issues. Take a look for yourself and see what you think of this expanded incarnation of the Twilight Zone.
Not a robot.
Not a robot!
Stop it, Walter!
All right, sorry.